data scientists, mathematicians, and engineers starting to build models that were very specifically created to answer one single question. So that may be something like determining a credit score using 20 or 30 factors and trying to determine, based upon someone's scores, whether that person should have a loan or not. That's a very precise question that you're trying to answer, and that was a very classically well-suited thing to machine learning. Machine learning was a bit cumbersome. Your data scientist or engineer had to tweak and tune a lot of dials to get the model to work, but fundamentally it would look at historical data about credit applications and then use that to make predictions about new ones. And that's where we started in today's modern world of AI. The next thing that came along was what we call neural networks. Neural networks required much more computational power because they are much more powerful models. And in contrast to machine learning, which was focused on answering one very specific question, neural network technologies were trying to map to the brain and the way the brain works, and we're trying to develop a more generalized understanding. So as an example, you can see here an image of the number 3 on the left-hand side. This is the input, and the model's trying to understand and figure out what that image is. And through the training of these models, and I will talk about training a lot because the training is the key thing, giving these models lots of data that they can learn from, so then when you ask it a novel question, it can answer that question based upon everything it's learned. So all of these nodes in the middle, the model trains itself of how to figure out that this is a number 3. There might be a node in here which says, this point on the top of the 3 is a specific feature that it understands. The point in the middle may be another node that's a different feature. And by combining all this information together, it can take the input on the left, what is this picture, and turn that into an answer on the right, which is this number. And that's how neural networks fundamentally work. This was a big breakthrough for us. And there are a variety of different kinds of neural networks. So there are particular kinds of neural networks that are focused on image processing, like the example we just saw. There are other kinds of networks that focus on things like speech. If you've used Siri and gone back and forth between text to speech or speech to text, that's an example of another kind. And the most important one we're going to talk about, I'm sure many of you, if not every one of you in the room, has used ChatGPT or some similar kind of GPT model, or what we call a large language model. These are focused on text and trying to learn a general understanding of the world by just consuming as much text as they can possibly grab to train on and to learn from. I'm going to double click into this because I think it's the thing we're all most familiar with, and I'm going to explain how these models work and how they have evolved over the last few years. So I've used the word training a number of times, and I want to try and explain how the model thinks about text data, right? So if you think of your own use of ChatGPT, you provide a prompt, and then it gives you an answer, right? So let's talk about what's happening in that instance. So as I was preparing for the speech, I simply asked ChatGPT to give me a 1-paragraph description of Anguilla. And it gave me this text. And what you can then see, there's a tool that OpenAI makes available that's called the tokenizer. And what it shows you is how the model thinks about the text that you might feed it from a training perspective. So every color you see here, it's almost one-to-one with a word. Sometimes it's a part of a word, sometimes it's a whole word. That's what in the AI world we call a token. Okay? So the first thing the model does is it decomposes all of the text it's consuming to understand what these tokens are. And then it turns all of these words into numbers. So the important thing to understand, especially about early AI models, and this is changing at the bleeding edge of what's happening now, is that the model does not understand the words. It doesn't know what it's reading. It just knows this set of letters is integer 357. What it cares about is the relationship between that word with other words that surround it. And when it consumes billions and billions of examples, it starts to develop a relational understanding between different words. And that then feeds into a database. Think of it as a 3-dimensional database where all of these words pour in, and you start to have clusters of words that are similar. Okay, so you can see on the left-hand side, words like dog and cat and kitten will cluster together. and words like banana and apple will do the same. And the model then can use that understanding after seeing billions and billions of observations so that when you ask it a question, it can start to make predictions about what the words are that answer your question. And in the early large language models, this was relatively simplistic. The important thing to understand about that is that the LLM is simply predicting what the next best word is based upon the words that came before. Again, it doesn't understand what it's telling you. It's just telling you that number 4,857 most often comes after number 3,200. That's all it knows. So we often call these in the AI world a next token predictor or a next word predictor because these were relatively dumb, okay? There was a big breakthrough in the AI world around 2018, 2019 that we call transformers or transformer models. And this was the first time the models started to understand not just individual words, but sentence structure, right? So you can see in this example, the subject-verb-object combination of the dog chased the cat starts to become something that the model understands, that there's a relationship between these words, and it's not just arbitrary. And it knows the difference between dog chased, that order of words, and chased dog. It knows that those are different things, okay? Likewise, the other big breakthrough is what we call context. So as you look at the sentence, the dog chased the cat because it was fast, the model starts to understand or ask the question, what is it? Is it the dog or is it the cat? And it develops a probabilistic understanding to say, I think it is the dog. And over, again, billions and billions of observations, it develops an understanding of these things that can then be applied when you ask it a new question it has never seen before. Well, what's the result of all of this? You can see that the first GPT large language model came out in 2018. And you can see that it had 117 million tokens, like these words that you saw, on which it was trained. And you can see the accuracy, the performance in the next row was okay. It was 80%. And I think we've all experienced using a model and asking a question and finding that the answer it gave was a bit off. It didn't really answer the question I asked, or it gave me just the flat out wrong answer, right? But over time, you can see these models are incredibly hungry. What we've learned is the more data you give it, the higher the performance of the model. And you can see by the time we get to 2022, where ChatGPT 3.5 comes out, which we all know from the .ai domain registration explosion in growth that happened in 2023, that model had 175 billion parameters of data that it consumed to train that model, and the answers became much, much better. You can see now with ChatGPT 5 in 2025, that was trained on 5 trillion parameters. And we're at a point now that essentially these large language model companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and so on, they've essentially run out of data to train on. They are looking for new sources of data that they can utilize, and in some cases, they're creating what we call synthetic data. They're creating artificial data to try and train the models with all kinds of new situations and new kinds of data that they generate themselves. So you can see the performance has gotten to a point now where on the tests that measure large language models, they're almost at 100% perfect relative to humans who would answer the same tests and information. What that essentially means is they're now needing to build new tests that go beyond normal human tests you would use to develop or measure intelligence. They're creating whole new tests because we've kind of maxed out. And if you think of that in a human IQ perspective, the model in a general sense has about a 140, 145 IQ. In the global population, that's about 0.1% of humans are at that intelligence level in a generalized way. Now, the important thing to note there is that doesn't mean there aren't people that are not smarter than today's AI. There are. If you're a surgeon or you have some specific domain of expertise, you're going to understand that better, even still today, than the model will. But the performance continues to increase here. So we're going to see this get more and more difficult for humans to outrun what the models know. All right, so let's talk about some examples and the results of all of these advances that I've been talking about.
Hey ChatGPT, I'm here with my coworker today. We'd like you to act as our translator for us. So every time I say something in English, can you repeat it back in Spanish? And every time he says something in Spanish, can you repeat it back in English?
Sure, I can do that. Let's get this translation train rolling.
Hey, how's it been going? Have you been up to anything interesting recently?
Hola, ¿cómo te ha ido? ¿Has hecho algo interesante últimamente?
Hola, bien. Sí, un poco ocupado aquí preparando un evento para la semana que viene.
Hey, I've been good. Just a bit busy here preparing for an event next week.
So when we start to see these examples from models that have a performance like I showed you that's nearly 100% accurate, the use cases of this become quite obvious. When we think about ESL students and interacting with them in the educational system, or we talk about translating documents from a text perspective even for government for different languages, or from the hospitality industry's perspective, translating things for different visitors coming from different countries and so on, these use cases become obvious. And the same kinds of things we've been talking about that have been true using text as the tokens, the same is true for things that use images and objects and video as the training information. And you can see here the company Waymo, which is a Google company. These are literally driverless cars that have been driving in San Francisco for the last 3 to 4 years. I was just there. These cars will be deployed to 16 cities next year. Tesla is deploying into 12 cities. And Waymo expects to do 1 million trips per week for passengers without any driver at all. We're also seeing in the humanoid robot space, these robots are controlled by the same kinds of models that we're talking about here. Again, more driven by images and video than by text words. They can understand the words, but they need the object information. On the left-hand side, the first applications have really been in business, using them in warehouses to assemble things or pick and pack in manufacturing and other kinds of warehouses. But you can also see they're already starting to think about the personal application of these humanoid robots in the home and their ability to provide value on a home basis as well. All right, so where's all this going next? Everyone still with me? You good? All right. So what's coming next is what we call agentic AI, or the use of AI agents. And the big difference here from before is that in the world of AI agents, it's not just an ability to ask a question and get back some information based upon all of this rich trove of training data it has. What AI agents introduce is the notion of reasoning, the ability to take a request from you, to plan a response, to do the research, to consider alternatives, and then to take action on your behalf. So you can think of this like a digital assistant that when you ask it a question, I want to go from Miami to Anguilla next week for a trip. I have 4 days. You know my travel preferences. I only have $400 to spend on the flight. Figure it all out for me. And that's essentially what the agent can do. So that's what's coming very quickly now. So if I talk about examples of this, I expect that one of the first examples you will see of this, because I know that government here uses Microsoft Office heavily, is the Microsoft Copilot for Office. And essentially this is a tool where, just as an example, you could say to this tool, look at the last 20 email conversations my project team had about our project, summarize those into a new note, grab the performance metrics off the Excel spreadsheet, which is our performance dashboard, unify all that information into a new report, send that out to the team, and schedule a follow-up meeting with everyone. And it will use all of the various Microsoft Office tools to accomplish that goal for you without you doing anything else other than the prompt that you provided. Okay? Another example, a startup in California called Ariel, which is focused on agentic AI. These guys are focused on the travel use case I just laid out, which is you simply provide, this is my goal, this is my objective, here are my preferences, and it will do everything to price out the airfare, to read the reviews of the hotels, to make its own internal recommendations, and very soon will literally be booking that for the end customer. In that travel case, another thing that also comes into play often, and I think this is very relevant in Anguilla, is the need to get a visa to make that trip that you want to make. There's a company called Neuron AI that's been focused on building an agentic solution so that all you have to do, and we all know how painful this process can be, to file with government, find out you spelled something wrong, you get rejected, it takes 6 more weeks. These guys have essentially built an agentic system to solve that whole problem. You provide your passport, 1 or 2 other documents that may be required by the country you're going to, and it fills out the forms for you, checks all the data, and literally can send that to the government in question on your behalf. So these are just some examples of the power that's coming out now. Now, why this wave is different? One of the big reasons is that user adoption of these models, because of the kinds of examples we're talking about, is so much different than anything we've seen before, and I'll show you some data on that. But one of the reasons that's true is because of the horizontal applicability of these tools. You don't use ChatGPT to answer one type of question, but use Anthropic, another large language model company, to answer a different kind of question. You simply ask whatever you want to ask against whichever model you like. It doesn't matter. So the generalized nature of these things is really, really powerful and something that has not been true in the waves that we've seen before. So to look at some data, the amount of investment happening in this space because of these incredible things we're seeing happen with AI is unprecedented. So through the first 3 quarters of this year, through September of this year, we've seen $200 billion invested by venture capital into just AI companies. Forget every other kind of company, okay? If I compare that with the internet, which was a massive sea change, right, in the technology world at the time, there was $53 billion invested in the year 2000, which was the peak of the build-out of the internet. And that does not even include the hundreds of billions being invested by public companies like Facebook, like Google, like Amazon. These companies are pouring never before seen amounts of money into this. And the reason is because the models with more money keep getting better. And I'll come back to that in a second. So to talk about the user adoption point that I talked about, it's interesting to look at things like the fact that it took Netflix 18 years to get to a point they had 100 million users. It took Facebook 5 years to get there. It took ChatGPT 2 months, right? So you can tell that something different is happening here. Oh. There we go. All right. So the penetration of the technology is also unprecedented. So if you look at this graphic of the percent of US households adopting different kinds of technology, from things as basic as electricity to things like smartphones, you can see that it took 25 years for 40% or so of US households to have electricity. We will get there with artificial intelligence in the next 2 quarters, okay? So this almost vertical line just tells you it's getting adopted at an incredibly fast rate that we've never seen before with different kinds of technology. So let's talk about some of the implications of this technology and where we're at with AI. So what this chart, it's a very busy chart, but I'll just try and explain what it's saying, is this lays out the amount of computational power, you can think of it as the amount of computer chips that are used for do AI computations, to train these models and then make them available for people to use. Over the past 50 years, we have quadrupled the amount of compute used every year for the past 50 years. Every single year, we keep adding more computational capability to make these models more powerful. And as you saw on my prior slide, the performance keeps getting better. So what that tells you is this is why hundreds of billions of dollars are pouring into the AI world. And the most important point I will leave you with tonight is to understand this basic thing as it relates to all of our ability to engage with AI from an Angwillian perspective, is the AI will never be dumber than it is today. As we go forward with every single day, it's only going to get better. So we need to get moving. It's still early, but it's never going to get worse, okay? I'll give you an example. I was just recently with a gentleman named Jason Clinton. Jason is the Chief Information Security Officer of one of these large language models that's called Anthropic, the company that makes that model. And he recently gave a speech at an event that we did in Washington, D.C., and he had this quote, which was that by the end of this year, 80 to 90% of the software development at Anthropic, which essentially is making the model better, is being written by the model. That doesn't mean it was helping an engineer. It means it was writing the code. The guy says, here's what I want you to create for me to create this new feature that the model's going to have. He goes to lunch, he comes back, and the model has written the code. Okay? Now the implication of that is that the junior engineer role, the way you would normally start into a company, is you would start at a very basic job with a boss, and they would teach you, and then you would advance, and you become more senior, and so on. The junior engineer role is gone from these companies. They literally no longer have it. So that is a ripple effect that's going to hit the rest of the technology world and the enterprise business world over the next 5 years. These guys are the canary in the coal mine. They're the most advanced, so this is where it's going to impact first. But these are the kinds of implications of what we're seeing with these technologies. There's also some negatives that we need to be careful about. So the top two articles here talk about the fact and are a reminder that these AI model technologies are still somewhat immature, which is to say, there are ways that you can trick them to tell you things that maybe they shouldn't tell you, right? So there's a security issue to be considerate of. On the bottom half here, you can see there's an issue related to data and confidential information and privacy as well. Something that we have all done in different ways, either with our personal information or with our business information, is to feed documents to the model to say, okay, read this document, give me a summary, analyze the numbers for me, and tell me what the answer is. Well, the thing you have to understand, does everyone remember I said there's a carnivorous desire for more data to train these models? Well, one of the default options in every large language model that you should all turn off is its right to use all of the things you tell it, to use that to further train the model. That's an option you can turn off. But essentially what these companies are doing is, because they've exhausted all of the rest of human information, they're using all of the things we all type as new training data to make the model better. Okay? So that's a risk. The point is, these are risks we need to be concerned about, but these shouldn't scare you because there's a tremendous amount of effort being put against these kinds of risks. And one of my main messages tonight is we have to get started on the basic understanding and learning and skills development and knowledge development of how to use these tools effectively while these problems are getting solved. And at the same time, the government will be focused on things like the kinds of governance rules and IT policies and security protections that are going to govern how we use AI in Anguilla. All right, so again, my caveat is that I cannot profess the best ways to use AI for every business in Anguilla or for government, but I will give some ideas of things that I think might be helpful. To start with the elephant in the room, of course, you own this incredible asset, which is the .ai domain registration infrastructure, and that incredibly powerful jewel that is growing alongside the tremendous growth of this entire sector and industry. And I do think it's interesting to look at that because it is a reflection of how things are growing. So through work with Mr. Hazel, who runs the DITES organization, who shared some data with me, I was able to do a basic plot here to show that after ChatGPT 3.5 came out, which was the seminal moment in late 2022, we started to see the real hockey stick in use of AI and the sale of .ai domains. And at that time, there was 159,000 active .ai domains. Well, when you look at where we are today, we've had a 6-fold growth in the active registrations for AI domains. And if I simply look at the monthly growth rate of active new registrations, and that's been relatively constant for the past 2 years, and I apply that to the next 2 years, you will see a 3x, 3-fold growth once again in the next 2 years. Now you'll notice here the line is not linear. It's not a straight line, right? We're seeing what we call exponential growth. And that's because even if that growth rate is consistent, when I'm applying that to a larger and larger base number, that small percentage means more and more and more and more. And you can start to see the curve start to change slope, right? Which means it's accelerating. The most important point of that is there's obviously a relationship between that and resources that Anguilla has and controls. And as we talk about the things that we can be doing next from a government perspective, that provides resources that can be reinvested in ways that might really power Anguilla in a very interesting set of ways. All right, so if we look at the AI industry and the kinds of things that are required for AI to work, you can think of it logically in two buckets. On the bottom, there's a bunch of infrastructure stuff, like the semiconductor chips that are used to do all this computation and mathematics to give you the answer to your prompt, right? And things like the data centers where all these machines are running to do all these computations, and things like the energy backbone that powers all these data centers, all of the hard gear and stuff that makes this whole thing work. The quick answer here is there is hundreds of billions of dollars pouring into this layer. To give you an example, the data centers that are getting built to date, where AI questions that you ask get answered, the campuses where they're building these data centers now are consuming between 500 megawatts and a terawatt of power for one campus. They're taking up 800 to 1,000 acres. So these are absolutely huge locations. The point of saying all that is that infrastructure is getting built for you. That's not a problem that Anguilla needs to solve to participate in the AI economy. But the question is, where else can we participate? And the top half is really the answer to that question. So developing the skill sets and the human capital and the knowledge and understanding of how these tools work, how they can be deployed aggressively to solve different business problems is an incredible opportunity. Building different AI applications that use that infrastructure is really where the opportunity will be. Okay, it's important to get moving. It feels like AI is on a runaway train. It's never going to get dumber, so we have to get started. So I think some of the key steps here are getting educated, building the programs by which we can upskill everyone from whatever their starting point is with AI and their ability to use these kinds of tools and employ them, whether for government purposes, business purposes, and so on. And it's essential to start experimenting, which is to say, take a particular kind of problem in a lab-like environment and start to play with the tools. These tools are still early, so they break. Things don't always work. And even starting to understand those limitations is very, very valuable in terms of your overall understanding of the tools and how you can start to use them for different kind of work environments. Leveraging that existing AI infrastructure that others are building accelerates all of that. We don't need to build that physical infrastructure. And finally, get to deploying against high-value use cases where the risk is low. We talked about security issues. We talked about data sensitivities. Let's pick use cases that are relatively easy to get started with and start making progress. All right. To get a little bit more specific, obviously there's an incredible amount that government can do. Government needs to provide the governance and policy framework to protect data, to ensure that the tools that are used here are secure. Because we don't need to build that foundational infrastructure, that saves a lot of effort for us. However, investment in communications infrastructure, in the broadband infrastructure, makes Anguilla a much more viable place to participate in the global economy. We obviously all live now in a post-COVID remote work world. Whether we're in the United States, most of the companies I invest in nowadays are entirely remote. They are not in a particular physical location. That means that Anguilla can participate in the global workforce if you have those AI-driven skills, and just like anyone in Kansas or Chicago or anywhere else. Finally, I'll come to digitization of data, and I'll say that as someone who does lots of searches using these AI models about Anguilla, about Anguillian law, about real estate rules, about all kinds of things I'm trying to understand about Anguilla, the answers I get are very questionable. And that's frankly because these models don't have access to a lot of the historical information in Anguilla. That is an opportunity for Anguilla, which is to say taking these historical data sets, be they real estate transactions and records, or other kinds of financial information, or other things that have not to date been digitized in a systematized, meaningful way, you can turn that into value, whether that's uniquely for government, by government, whether that's by private sector for government, whether that's for the development of regional tools that may be pan-Caribbean, that create interesting value for the region. There's lots of opportunities around data there. You could even choose to license that data to OpenAI or Anthropic or others who are so hungry for information to make their models better. On the educational side, there's a lot of administrative automation kinds of tasks that can benefit greatly from artificial intelligence to create a better experience for students, other kinds of constituents, parents, and so forth and so on. I'm working closely with Mr. Romney and PS Dr. Richardson Lake on Project Inspire. So I know that there's now this very rich e-learning infrastructure in place, and there is an ICT curriculum that perhaps we can intensify the relationship of the ICT curriculum with AI learning for students to make them almost AI native in their skill sets. So they understand how to use these tools, they're very fluent in their use, and they can leverage that as they get into the workforce later. There's also the obvious adult application of this as it relates to vocational programs, digital workforce development for the highly educated employee base that's already here, and bringing those skills rapidly into use in Anguilla. On the industry sector and business side, there are myriad ways to apply these tools. These are just some examples on the tourism and hospitality side, but there's lots of other kinds of tools that are available, applications that are available that would benefit other kinds of sectors. An example would be for the digital media companies, and I know there are a number in Anguilla. There's a tool called Writer AI. The Writer AI tool can digest whatever marketing materials you have ever created that speak in the voice of your company and your brand and speak with a certain tone, be that a fun, exciting tone or a more serious tone. And you can then prompt the model to create new content for you, social media posts, marketing materials, blog posts, whatever you want. It can generate infinite information for you that you can use to continue to market your company, as an example. In the legal field, there's a very well-known agentic AI company called Harvey AI. Harvey is focused on taking the entire history of case law in the United States and making it easy for lawyers to ask questions about cases they're working on now, where they can get all of the historical cases that were related to that to make their arguments better. I don't believe such a thing exists for Anguillian law. That is an opportunity for someone to build that. Okay, a last quick example, which is, I don't know how many of you have heard of vibe coding or no coding, but this is a concept that's become very popular in the last 2 years. And essentially, this is simply the idea that you no longer need to be a computer scientist or an engineer to write software. And the 3 company names listed here, these are all tools you can use for free, you can play with, but they all allow you to simply provide a prompt as to what you want, and it will build that for you. So as I was on the airplane working on my slides on the way here a few days ago, I pulled up Replit, which is a tool that I use, and I asked it to build for me a website focused on the marine ecosystem surrounding Anguilla. And I asked it to consider the formalized marine parks that exist, as well as the generalized marine ecosystem, and to contemplate fisheries and the fishing industry and how that relates to these marine ecosystems. So I fed that in, and I went back to my slides, and 10 minutes later, it had created an entire website for me. It had done all of the research to discover all of the available information about marine ecosystems, the interrelationship, looking into regional Caribbean fishing information and so on, and synthesized all that into the website you see here. And on the left, it's telling me about what it did, and I could spend another hour or two tweaking and tuning and say, I don't like that picture, give me a different picture, I don't like this section. You could endlessly work on this thing, but ultimately you can simply say, I want to deploy this, and now you have a website on an entirely new thing, which could be an entirely new business that didn't exist an hour before you started this work. All right, I know that was a lot. In summary, I think we're at the threshold of a really, really interesting time. Although AI can be scary and there's been tremendous progress that's happened over the last 5 years, it is still early. That means if we get started, we can upskill and get the skills we need to take advantage of AI, but we need to get started. I think it's the right time because we do have time to focus on this and to take care of it with the resources that are available from government and elsewhere. I think this is the right place because you have this incredible physical embodiment of AI that no one else has, which is the .ai domain, and the ability to use that to develop a whole brand and series of activities around that is unprecedented. No one else really has that in the same way. And finally, you have the right people. As I know from my work with Mr. Romney, you have a highly educated workforce here with not only university degrees, often from Great Britain or the United States, but advanced degrees, master's degrees, PhD degrees. You have a very, very skilled workforce that can pick up these kinds of skills with the right training programs and support in workforce development. In the schools, we already have an e-learning infrastructure in place. We have an ICT curriculum in place that can be advanced. We have a lot of the core tools we need to move quickly. For all of these reasons, I think the question that I ask when I think about everything we've gone through here is, if we start now, where can we be in the next 10 years? Okay, I know I ran over. I hope that was helpful. I look forward to talking with you all on the panel that comes next. Thank you.
Another round of applause for Mr. Han. Very, very informative. So, as we start our panel, in the spirit of introducing, I realized I didn't introduce myself. So, good evening. My name is Jade Raymond. I am the General Manager for Flow. And I think my mosquito is somewhere sitting, proud mom of a baby somewhere in here. So I want you guys to tease her a little later that we call her Mosquito. All right, introducing our panel this evening, the Minister of Information, Technology, and E-Government Services, the Honorable Jose Vanterpool. The Learning and Development Manager, Capchuluka, at Belmont Hotel, Mr. Ameya Nagakar. The Director, Department of Information Technology and E-Government Services, Mr. Von Hazel. OECS Pearls Regional Technology Entrepreneur. One moment. Nashane is representing Mr. Hazel. My apologies. Nashane Johnson is representing Mr. Hazel. Mr. Clendon Biscuit, Technical Specialist, Full Stack Developer, OECS. And our featured speaker, Mr. Andy Hun. So this evening's panel is welcoming the audience's questions. So I hope you guys are ready. Yes, and going to the mic. I have a trusted assistant this evening. Sharnay will be helping me with the mic throughout the crowd. So if you have any questions, just signal to myself or Sharnay, and we'd be happy to bring the mic to you. Alrighty? So, Mr. Han, I was gonna start with you, and while I was listening earlier, I realized that you answered majority of my prepared questions for you. So thank you so much for that. Okay, and my apologies. We also have online with us Mr. Tahira Banks Webster and Mr. Gino Webster from Alta North Company, our virtual panelists. Tahira, you guys can hear me? Okay, one moment, because we can't hear you. Okay, Tahira, go now.
Yes, we can hear you very well. Can you hear us?
Yes. Good evening. So, Mr. Hun, as I was saying, you answered majority of my prepared questions after I did some research and so forth. But I do have one question to kick off our discussion this evening. As you were speaking tonight, I know one of the concerns that most people think about when thinking of AI coming from a technology company is whether or not AI replaces humans, right? So, when speaking tonight, you spoke about AI's potential to amplify creativity and innovation. Could you share an example where AI has truly enhanced human capability rather than replaced it? That's a good one. I tried.
That's a great question. You know, I think with the evolution that's happening now, and I think one of the most important ways to think about how the workforce changes, how job roles change, is we're going to be able to focus more and more on the high-value work parts of our jobs. Many of the examples you'll hear about right now are things like factory workers. I don't know if this was big news in Anguilla, but there was some information that leaked from Amazon a few weeks ago from their internal documents that talked about the robots that they use, which are all powered by AI. The intelligence they use is all AI models. And Amazon essentially has seen that they have the ability to forego hiring 500,000 people in the coming years. Now, that can sound really scary. To be honest, Amazon was having so much difficulty hiring humans that they would have never been able to find those people in the first place. But if I generalize that thought process, what you're going to see is AI initially taking a lot of the simpler tasks away from us, the things that are more rote or the things that are more basic, and that will allow people to take on more intelligent jobs or the higher value parts of their jobs. If we think about software engineering as an example, we talked about the junior engineer role going away. Well, what engineering is going to look like very soon is rather than the engineer writing software code, the engineer will be managing 6 agents, and the agents are writing the code. And the human is ensuring that the work product that results is accomplishing the goal that was asked for in the first place, or whether the prompt was wrong, or whether the system is doing something inaccurately, and so on. So these are the kinds of ways I would think about the changes that are going to happen in the workforce.
Would anyone like to contribute? Mr. Vanterpool?
Yeah, good evening. One thing that I would like to say, or to add to what Mr. Hamwood said, is that while there's often the fear that AI will replace jobs, technology solutions tend to displace jobs and not necessarily replace them. So if I take it to like a less tech-intensive solution, when agriculture used to be the mainstay in many industries, and then a tractor was created, a lot of persons would have thought that the tractor is going to do away with the laborers in the field, etc. But then it opened up opportunities for persons to become mechanics. Mm-hmm. It upped food production, which had a net impact on terms of overall general health. So when we think about these AI tools, even in the case of a software engineer, I went to university for 4 years to learn much about this, and now someone with ChatGPT can kind of replace what I do. But at the same time, I don't necessarily view it as a threat, more so as an opportunity, because it now makes me much more effective at doing what I do because I understand it. And when we think about it from an educational point of view, there are a number of young persons who are in the room this evening who may not have the opportunity to go off and study a 4-year degree, but however, they are now empowered to be able to carry out the same level of work as a software engineer who went off and was formally trained. So while we can look at it as a threat, there are so many more associated opportunities that it empowers people to do that I think we should look on the brighter side.
Mr. Matt, I know you wanted to respond.
Right. So what I wanted to highlight is AI is here not to replace humans, but here to actually augment what we humans are actually. And this is especially true in the luxury hospitality because I represent Belmont, which belongs to LVMH, Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy brand. Now, Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy is one of the largest luxury goods company in the entire world, with over 84 maisons across the luxury segment in all the segments of the luxury market, from wines and spirits to perfumes and cosmetics, and as well as fashion and leather goods, as well as luxury travel, Capchuluca, Belmont Hotel, Anguilla, right? What I've seen in the last 2 years and what I foresee based on all my research is basically in every aspect of human interaction with AI, it actually gives you superpowers. It actually leverages you. I'll give you a very simple example. I represent the human resources or the learning and development team. So exactly like the example of the flight where you give a command and in 10 minutes the app is ready for the marine aspects in Angular, I actually now create PowerPoints specific to customized training requirements of my teams within few minutes, basically, right? Which earlier used to take me weeks. So for me, I feel super powered with AI. Of course, there's the human AI collaboration, basically. Yeah, don't tell my secrets out. Yeah, but this is just one use case. Few examples. For example, imagine yourself sitting now here, yeah, and being able to put an artificial intelligence goggle, and which is already happening in Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, you know, my parent company, where you can go into a virtual environment and actually browse a luxury store of Louis Vuitton in London or Bangkok and actually have or simulate the entire experience of buying a 20,000 Louis Vuitton purse just by sitting on this chair and actually purchasing that in a virtual environment, and Louis Vuitton will deliver that to you. How cool is that? And that's where this technology is heading to. So there are very real use cases of leveraging UI, artificial intelligence, in a daily basis as well as in more strategic opportunities. Thank you.
Hey Jade, I'd like to hop in here just for a few. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Gina.
All right, awesome. All right. Okay, yeah, so I'd like to add to Mr. Hunt and Jose's point where I am, on a regular day, I am covered in code, I would say. And I would say that AI doesn't really replace me, myself, as an engineer, but it allows me to operate on a higher level. This is the value-based level that Mr. Hunt was referring to earlier in his point. So for example, we use AI across all stages of our product development pipeline. So for the creative aspect, it's used to generate like prompts for research, to create concepts, and then when we move into the design phase, it's then used to A/B test without a user base. That's the cool part, because normally you'd have to send it out to 10 or 20 users and say, hey, tell me what you think about this. So it's already using the data, a model that was trained on different components of the design, and it can tell you exactly what's wrong and where to improve. And on the development end of things, we essentially created our own internal software engineers. We call them agents. That is what he was talking about. But they essentially update, they manage our code bases. They can write code. They can efficiently create new features in 10 minutes. Literally, you go to lunch and you come back and the code is written. But what's important to note here is, like Mr. Hunt said, every day AI will get better, right? Where we are right now is already great, but it's going to get better. And what I'm learning is that you still need to understand your craft. So whatever it is that you're doing or whatever you've chosen as your career, it can still get it wrong. So I'll give you the perfect example. We were working on a feature for one of our products, and for some reason, it could not complete the code in the way I wanted it to complete it. And so I had to literally go through everything, and then I realized, oh, this is what's causing the issue. And then I was better able to explain the prompt and what my expected outcome was. So that is no, but I do believe that in time, as the models get better, like that will no longer be a thing. It'll just do everything for you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster.
And I'm going to chime in. As OECS Commissioned software developer within the EDMU, as my colleague in the room will tell you, we are a small team, but we run a lot of projects. So it becomes important to have that sort of agility. And the AI gives you agility, But then one of the things I always emphasize is being the human in the engagement. Giving agency to the AI to remove your expertise. As our colleague here was saying, to remove the expertise then is not what we want. What we want is to allow it to enhance our abilities. It's a tool. It cannot then replace our expertise and our agency. So for me as a developer, I know that, for instance, this last week and this week, we were running OECS student census. So when my head sends me an email at 1 o'clock in the morning and says, hey, this is showing incorrectly, I don't have 4 hours to troubleshoot it. I know that in the morning it has to be fixed. I need to sleep. So then I am going to use the AI to give myself those superpowers to be able to do that. But I am still the expert because I have to look at my code and decipher where the connected strands are to make those changes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Biscuit. Do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, we have a gentleman in the back.
The right questions to ask the AI, because AI, it can answer all of these questions, and especially if it's going to be taking entry-level positions, how am I supposed to get that knowledge to know what to ask and what type of resources or like programs can be provided within Anguilla to ask the right questions?
Who would like to go first?
May we ask what industry you're in, sir?
I currently work in hospitality, but I would like, let's say I wanted to make a website offering tour guides for Anguilla. I don't know what to ask the AI to get to that point, but if there was a class, that's something I would definitely enroll in.
So I'll just jump in first, and please join in, folks. One of the most important things I would suggest to you is to just start trying tools, because there is no cost to just starting to learn. So tools like Lovable or Cursor or Replit that we talked about that can help you without being an engineer build a website like you're thinking about. You can simply create an account and start trying to build things. The other thing I would suggest, and I've learned over the last year or two, which may sound silly, but is to ask the model what you should ask the model.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you want to learn about website development with AI tools, ask the model, what are some of the tools that I could use that would be the simplest to learn? Or it will literally guide you down the path. Some of the most powerful use cases I've heard about with AI use have been people using it almost as a one-on-one tutor in whatever domain of interest that they have. But the final thing I'll say is, even if it's not that technically specific, if you have a passion in some area, art, we were talking about art and wine earlier, just start engaging with ChatGPT or some other kinds of tools like this in the area of wine. Just see what it can tell you, how you can learn, ask it other ways you should prompt it that would give you better answers. It will tell you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Allow me to chime in because I've gone through the exact same process for the last 2 years. Like I've learned different frameworks of prompt engineering, data engineering, and lately what I've found is you're playing or you're actually experimenting with an LLM, which is at an IQ of 150, as we saw, which is 0.1% of the genius of the entire humanity. So instead of learning another course, I would say, yes, there's a learning curve, but actually experiment, practice daily, ask questions, or ask the ChatGPT agent itself, how can I create a prompt for this based on your specific example of tour guide, right? I've done that, and as my passion projects over the last couple of years, for example, I always wanted to write a book, and I love Marvel, I love DC Comics, all superhero movies. Whenever I have time on the weekends, I would Netflix and chill, so to speak, right? Just to connect with everybody. So what I've done is I wanted something to read on those kind of, the story of Loki and Thor and Odin and the Greek gods and, different mythologies around the world. So I said, instead of me reading from others, why don't I take the very best of the entire mythology that has already been in different agents, and I created my own book, and it's available on Amazon under the series of World Mythology 101. So I'm not selling my books here, but just giving a real use case that with artificial intelligence, you can, if you have an idea, you can go from ideation to validation and launching that product out into the world. And it's been exactly 1 year since my mythology books are live. They are bestsellers. They are just buy it. No? So that's just
You
one
say just go
example.
buy it.
Right? One very quick example I wanted to give, because I also started playing with vibe coding or no coding, the agents which can build complete apps. So a couple of years before, I had challenges sleeping, so I tried every possible intervention to improve my quality of deep sleep. And deep sleep is very important for you to live an optimized life. Right? It's directly connected to your energy levels during the day and what you can achieve. So again, I used artificial intelligence. I've created my own app using AI over a period of weeks. I did not just prompt in 10 minutes. And now it's in the final stages where I'll be launching it out on iOS and Android. It could be called Sleep Master or Somnara. I'm still figuring the marketing and the logos out. But what I'm saying to everybody is basically go experiment. Yes, you can do the learning frameworks, but at the end is the practical implementation. So if you have a pain point, even in your own life, sleep issues for me as an example, right? Very rough. I turned that pain point into a product because like me, there could be others who would have problems with sleep. And with that, I could be of help to someone. And if I'm making profits out of it, it's a double, a benefit for everybody involved. So it's a win-win situation.
Mrs. Banks. Mrs. Banks-Webster, and then we'll take Mr. Vanderpool.
Okay, very nice. Thank you for the question. I didn't catch your name, but I want to thank you for the question because I believe that it is one that many persons in the room may have. There's a lot of technical talk, of course, and the engineers and technologists will dive into that. But for the average person, you want to figure out, I hear about artificial intelligence, I hear about these LLMs, how is it that I can take that and apply it to my life today? And my advice to you would be to be curious. When we were younger, when we were children, there was nothing that we imagined that we would not try. And as we go through life and as we go through the education system and as, life, we start to put limitations on how we think, and we start to doubt ourselves, and we start to put restrictions on what we ask or what we think is possible. And with artificial intelligence, what I have found to be particularly useful is there's no limit. And to approach it as I would my life as a child, where I would just try things. So I brain dump a lot. In your case, you have an idea for a tourism-based product or website product service. I would say when you leave here today, once you finish listening to this panel, go download ChatGPT, download any of those, and hit record on your phone and just brain dump your idea. Just talk into it. Just be curious. Just say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. This is why I think it's interesting. This is how I would like to make money from it. Tell it anything you want, and then say, what would be my next steps? What would you suggest are my next steps? And maintain that curiosity when it gives you the answer. Well, why do you say that? Well, what's next from there? And you go down and down the rabbit trail. And I think that you'll be really amazed with what you find and what ideas it throws back at you. And of course, you have to execute, which I think is what everyone is saying. But my 2 cents as a part of that question would be just to be really curious and to remove the limitations or the restrictions in terms of how you ask the questions. Just be curious. Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, the final thing that I'll add to that is just treat it as if it's a conversation with like a tutor, the same way you just asked us the question. You didn't just say, I want to create a tour company. You let us know that, well, I don't really have a background in this. This is what my background, I would want to learn and how to improve it. And for example, I'll give you a real situation that I've just used in the past 24 hours. I have to work on a research proposal for my doctoral course. And the thing is, most of the people who are on my course, because it's in business administration, they come from business business backgrounds. So when I was prompting the AI, they didn't really give me much guidelines as to what is included in an academic research proposal for a business realm. So I let the AI know, this is a task that I have to do. I come from a computer science background. I know the area that I want to study. This is the general area, but I'm not sure what a team of academics would be looking for in a research proposal, specifically in the business sense. So you treat it as a conversation. So then it would say, okay, the fact that you know what you want to do and you have a computer science background in that area is actually a plus. So let's figure out the other areas, and you just have that conversation go back and forth. So really and truly, ultimately, the way I look at AI, I use it as a brainstorming tool. And even when I think I know the answers or think I already know the direction, often I would tell it, this is what I'm thinking. Based on what I'm thinking, do you have any ideas as to how I might be able to improve it? Or what are the drawbacks, the pros, the cons? So just treat it as a conversation, and it makes you think in ways that you may not have considered before.
I can tell you, my ChatGPT's name Bridget. That's how close Bridget and I are. You know, I've named her, and in the morning I say, good morning, B, so that she knows my day has started so she can keep me in check. So really take that advice, really treat it as a conversation. Alrighty, any other questions from, so we'll have the gentleman here, and then we'll come back to you in the gray shirt, Sharoni.
Good evening, all.
Good evening.
My name is Barrett Telemak. I'm a student of Albina Lake Arts Comprehensive School. And I have a question relating towards education using AI. For example, in 2025-2026, CSEC is starting to allow to use AI on SBAs and etc. And I was wondering how that would impact our students, because usually students use AI and become dependent and addictive, and it actually, how would you say, dulls their skills as students, and it might also lower their grades or one's percentage in CSEC. But I was wondering how would us as a people push forward to limit the percentage of being percentage of children becoming dependent, and use AI as a tool to more sharpen our learning process.
Mr. Biscuit?
You said your name was Barrington? Barrington? Oh, Barry. Okay. Barry, I want to speak directly to you. I'm a career educator. I haven't been teaching for 50 years, but I've been teaching for 18 before I started my work at the Commission. So I've taught at the secondary school level, and I've taught at the post-secondary level for tertiary. One of the first things I want to say is that I think what CXC did is, considering the fact that 70% of member states have no AI policies whatsoever, that actually is the first step. It may not be the final step, but it's the first step. Now, for persons like yourself, like young persons like yourself, one of the things you need to understand is the educating of yourself. I'll talk to you first. The educating of yourself about the tool that you're using and what the pros and cons are of that tool is one of the first things you have to take responsibility for. Secondly, as the adults in the room and as the teachers, we then need to educate ourselves and then educate the young persons about the tools that they're using. When Google came out, and I use this analogy widely, when Google came out, educators everywhere thought that Google would make students bad researchers. Now, if you open the dictionary, the contemporary dictionary, there is a verb called Googling. You see where I'm coming from? So at that juncture, what we started to do was we started to train students how to do research better using Google. It meant teaching them how to use advanced searching techniques on Google in order to pull out the relevant information that they want. Academic institutions like universities and so on, nobody is losing their minds over Google. So at the end of the day, we now need to teach our students how to use it safely, how to use it efficiently, and then our students now also need to do a little bit of research to understand the tools that they're going to use. That's my contribution.
Thank you.
Hey, Jade, I'd like to hop in here quickly.
Mr. Johnson?
I work in IT, which is the IT department, and a lot of times we do see people becoming reliant on the technology that is available. But policies, we realize that there are not a lot of policies about, and not a lot of ways we teach people how to use things. And in DITES, we had this discussion just recently about drafting policies, not just for students, but for the general public, because there are a lot of different AI tools about, and not all of them are equal. Some of them have security risk. That means your data is going to places that we don't necessarily want them to go, and to countries that might use it not the way we want to use it. So yes, it's important that we do have these tools, but in general, I think the way we use these tools I think that should be a step next for our lawmakers and those in leaders, and those in lead to push forward, because these tools are not going away, and they're going to be, like I said, CXC is now allowing this. So especially in Angular, start drafting policies, start teaching our children how to use, not just our teacher, even the teachers as well. I think that's...
Mr. Vanterpool, this feels like a good segue to you responding.
Well, I just want to say it's been a long day because earlier we had the budget debates, but in my presentation for the budget debates earlier today, one of the things that I would have focused on is the first half of 2026. One of the key focuses within our ministry, of which DITES is a part, will be on drafting the policies necessary for digital transformation and digital governance in Anguilla. So we've already engaged in conversations with the attorneys general's chambers about getting the process started, because when we think about AI, putting our people out there, the data protection laws, for example, they're very key and critical, but in order to put the legislation in place, the first step is the policies. So just today we committed to doing that, and so in 2026 we have our work cut out for us.
Hey, Jane.
We have a question in the front. I'm
I just
sorry.
wanted to comment very briefly on that, because that's
My
a very
apologies.
important question.
Yeah, sure. And then Mr. Webster will go right after you.
Absolutely. So when it comes to the question of artificial intelligence and we becoming kind of slaves or addicted to it, the way I look at it is artificial intelligence, just like any other tool before, is neutral. You talk about money, you talk about fire. Fire can be used to create, or fire can be used to destroy. Talk about social media, for example, right? Many of us are addicted. So social media, again, either you can scroll mindlessly, watching cats and dogs whole day and do nothing of your life, or you can use social media to achieve, in a way, your dreams. Let's say you want to become a Michelin star chef, or let's say you want to become the world's best wine sommelier or bartender. Then I can use that tool as social media to follow the best chefs in the world or the best bartenders or wine sommeliers in the world and learn from them. But always remember who is the master. The technology is a tool for you, and you are, as a human, the master of it. But when you swap the roles, right? When the technology becomes the master and you become the tool, that's where the addiction and the problem is. So my answer to you, Barrington, yeah, excellent question. Always remember who's the master. Who's the master? You as the human being, and use the technology to your advantage, basically. So that way you won't get addicted.
Mr. Webster?
Thanks, Jade. Okay,
My apologies, because it's a lot to see.
Worries.
So.
No worries. So on a policy level, I'll leave that to the experts. But Barry, I want to speak to you on a student level, right? Now, I'll give you an example. In about maybe the past 3 months or so, my niece, she has been working on her SBAs and doing school assignments. And she messaged me and she said, hey, I need a subscription to ChatGPT. It's like, you need a subscription? What? what? You want the pro plan? And she ran out of credits, right, on the free plan. She is taking the answers straight out of ChatGPT and she's using it in her work. And so I'm like, you can't do that. We'll come back to that example. I want to give you another one. So this week, a student, he's away studying, he messaged me and he was like, hey, I'm stuck in life. I don't know what direction I should be going in. And he's in the tech space. And I'm like, so I called him. I was like, you're not going to jump off a building, right? Because the message reads like you're ready to just end it all. So that wasn't the case. But he's saying that he's having a very hard time applying for jobs. He's having a hard time applying for jobs because a lot of the jobs have replaced the junior engineer role completely with AI, right? And so I told him, just tell me about your life. What's happening right now? So he's telling me, I got the kids, I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with that. I was like, you wanna look for a job, you want a job, and then I said, what are some things that are happening right now? He gave me a few examples, and I told him, well, in our industry, like we try to solve a lot of problems with tech. So I asked him if there's anything that he's dealing with that he can use tech to solve, because I wanted to get across to him that it's not going to be enough, one, to just create or to apply for a job. You actually have to think about things and then come up with a solution to do it with tech. And there are a lot of tools that you can do that with. And so I told him the pitfall with what's happening right now. We have all these tools, the Coursers. I'm a big advocate for Coursera. I use it every day in my work. Is that it's doing everything for you, and so you are not allowed to fail, right? Back then, all you had was Stack Overflow, and when the AI could not give you an answer, you would have to figure it out on your own. And if you couldn't figure it out, you had to ask somebody that was a bit more experienced than you. And so what I'm trying to get across is your general awareness, Barry, of just being able to know that, hey, this is not a good thing. The fact that it can just give me an answer, it removes a core human aspect, right? The ability to think for ourselves, which is extremely important. And so by having the general awareness to know that this is an issue, right, which is first off a really good thing, because a lot of people are not aware of some of these things, then you're then able, because you know yourself, you're then able to ask it specific questions and tailor it to your learning environment or how it is that you learn. So first off, just great job being aware of that.
Yeah, awesome. So in the interest of time, before we take any more questions from the audience, we're gonna do some of our questions that we have prepared. But if we don't have time for the audience to ask, please feel free to attack them during the cocktail reception and get your answers to your questions, alrighty? So, Mr. Vanterpool, we know that you are extremely excited about the use of AI technology in your ministry. And one of the questions that we have for you is, how do you envision AI reshaping Angola's public services and digital governance in the next 5 years?
See, that's very interesting because that's actually the area that I'm going to be doing my research proposal on. So over the next 5 years, over the first 2 to 3 of them, I'll actually be running a long-term study of the work we'll be doing within the Ministry for Digital Transformation so that we can measure the results within the public sector, test and adjust and pivot as need be, so that we can have the data to use Angola as a true use case. But when we think about the public service, the first thing we have to look at is how is government systems currently run? How are public services being offered? In the 8 hours that someone is at work, what is it that they spend the most of their time doing? And if you're able to come up with a solution that allows someone to do in 8 hours, what they used to do in 8 hours in 3, I know some persons may look at it as, oh, that might be a threat to persons' jobs because now we don't need as many persons, but we don't need to think of it that way. We need to think of it, if you are coming to work for 8 hours to do this task and you can now complete it in 3, what does that allow you to do with the remaining 5 hours you have at work? Whether that's whether that's finding more meaningful ways to contribute value or giving you the freedom as a public service to explore the areas of your passion, because then you'll have natural ways of growth where people explore their passions, that they find ways to improve it that we didn't even think about. So over the next 5 years, we look forward to that study being run and to the digital implementation and transformation within the civil service and seeing what the end result is. But I can guarantee you it's going to be much better than what it is now.
We believe you. Mr. Nagakar, from a learning and development perspective, how can AI help train or upskill hospitality professionals?
Absolutely. Upskilling is, when we talk about LVMH as a company, as I've mentioned before, we have over 200,000 employees working in over 80 countries across 84 maisons or brands, right? So upskilling for AI is something which we think is our biggest opportunity, and one of the best ways we have done that is through the implementation of something called as Maya, which is an artificial intelligence created by LVMH for LVMH, and it has been automatically pushed and installed on all the desktops and users of all the LVMH brands around the world. And we as L&D managers, L&D directors are the change agents or the secret agents of change when it comes to artificial intelligence, and we are training and upskilling our teams on how to use AI for different use cases. Personally, in the learning and development domain, the way I look forward is basically, unlike generic trainings, yes, there will be still brand trainings and the generic group trainings, but the future is personalized learning journeys for each individual. Imagine a scenario where you are a front office agent or a housekeeper, just like if you know in the airline industry how they simulate the pilots, where they actually do real life simulation of navigating the airlines. Similarly, imagine you doing a role play with your artificial agent and saying there's a couple from London who is booking a call and you are a reservations agent, and you do the role simulation and there is a Q&A back and forth, and at the end of those 5 minutes the AI agent exactly tells you that you did these things pretty well and you need to improve on this.
Real time.
So that will be the level of, imagine e-learning centers with which are AI powered and with augmentation of artificial reality, so you can actually put yourself in the actual guest scenario and solve problems, do the role plays, and that's the future of learning and development, and it's almost gamified to the individual's learning experiences.
Amazing.
So it's very futuristic, but it's coming in the next 10 years. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, how is DITES integrating AI tools to improve service delivery, cybersecurity, or data management?
Okay, so one of the tools that we are currently using, DITES is a team, but we are not a big team. Ransomware is one of the biggest threats to the computer world. It costs anywhere from trillions just this year alone. So we use a tool, a ransomware AI tool, on our machines to help us detect and mitigate against any ransomware that might come our way. Just, I think 3 years ago, Costa Rica had an attack, and it was trouble for them. The entire government was shut down, and it was costing them anywhere from like $30 million a week. So to have that in our system is not a good thing. So we currently have a tool that we do use. We do have other tools as well, like in our antivirus systems and even in our email systems, because a lot of times the bad actors, they use phishing emails to attack us, and we try to mitigate that by using AI tools to detect. We don't, like I said, we don't have a big team. So like right now, AI tools are running. When people are not in the office, we are getting notifications constantly in case these things are happening. So we are using tools to protect ourselves every day.
Awesome. Thank you. Mr. Biscuit, in your view, what does an AI literate student look like, and how can our schools prepare them for the future?
I think an AI literate student looks like Barry.
And I think we have made the first step because he's aware that there are dangers. An AI literate student is a student who is aware of the dangers, is aware that there are changes happening around in the education sector. He's aware that there will be things that will affect him, and he's here asking the questions.
Yeah.
So that's an AI literate student.
Awesome. Mr. and Mistress Webster, what advice would you give to young entrepreneurs exploring AI-powered business models?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Jade. My question would not be so much so towards entrepreneurs, or my answer, sorry, would not be so much so towards entrepreneurs exploring AI-powered business models, but it would be focused on how it is entrepreneurs who see problems within our communities across the Caribbean, how they can use AI to support the success of their businesses. And on our end, we have been using AI since late 2022, early 2023, to automate a lot of our administrative and operational systems processes within the business, and so that has cut that overhead down dramatically. I would say that if you're an entrepreneur and you have an idea how it is you can use AI to support the success of your ideas, not just on the administrative end, but on the marketing end. We use it in finance in terms of identifying, from a cost analysis perspective, what is not just our break even, but what are margins at different price points, what would be our profit margin at different price points. And I think as the Anguilla Youth Business Foundation and your mandate to support businesses in Anguilla, it's important to support young businesses and more mature individuals in business, to support them in identifying how it is that they get moved to profitability. And so AI is an excellent tool to analyze how your costs and your selling price and all of these things relate. I spoke about curiosity, and so we use it a lot to just explore. And I think a part of business is, Gino shared a quote with me a long time ago earlier this year, a few months ago, that businesses, you don't go out of business because you run out of money. You go out of business because you run out of energy. And because if you have the energy, you can always find a way to make more money. And so what AI has been able to do for us within our businesses is it has it has activated other parts of our mind, and it has accelerated our decision-making process and given us the energy so that even when we approach or experience roadblocks, we're able to problem solve through those a lot faster, and we're able to get or move to success or some version of success a lot more quicker. Yeah, that's what I would say. You want to add to that?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll add to this. I mean, we speak about this topic a lot, like almost every day, so I won't go into any of that stuff. But if you had to leave here with something, I would say you have to be curious. You have to tinker. Like at the core of Alpha North is idea exploration. What happens if ABC? And what I want to get across to everybody here in the room today. The beauty about being in America is that a lot of systems are in place already, and somebody has already built something. You know, back in the day when the app stores came online, it was like, oh, there's an app for everything. Well, it's the same thing as up here in terms of like having a product or service that already solves a problem. And we need to get to that place as a community where we're very curious about tech and we're not afraid of it, all right? Because AI isn't going anywhere, and so we have to embrace it and get rid of that fear mindset. And once we embrace it, even if we don't know where to start, like Mr. Hunt said, you actually start by asking the question. So you ask the question and you explore. And I want us to all get to a place where, just like how I can go right now and start a business online in the US in an hour, have all the systems in place, collect the money at the end, build a website, do everything. I want us to get to a place as a community where we can do that. So everyone here, there's an issue or a problem that needs solving, whether it's not on a regional or community-based level, but it could be something between moms or women or something just for men. And we, one by one, as we start to build out these products, we're going to get to a place where it's no longer the American dream, but it's the Anguillian dream, right? So I just want to leave that with you. Just tinker, just explore.
Awesome. Mr. Hun, looking ahead, what excites you most about the next phase of AI innovation, and also what concerns you most?
So I think those are both tied together at the same time. And the example I would use is the conversation we had about agentic AI. There's going to be very quickly the ability for you to task agents to do things for you. And that's a paradigm we need to wrap our heads around, because it's different than how we thought about technology's ability to accomplish goals for us in the past. And there is a little bit of a law of unintended consequences that comes with that. As we get to understand these tools, there's all kinds of new legal frameworks that will need to get established. So if this agent buys something on your behalf and it either screws up the order or it successfully accomplishes the order, but you decided you didn't really want it, well, did you buy it? Did the agent buy it? There's lots of questions that need to get resolved. So I think there's tremendous power in that, in ways that create productivity enhancement for us as individuals in our personal lives, for our businesses, and so on. In my venture capital investing world, one of the things we're very focused on right now is the security around these agents. And how do you ensure there isn't some bad actor who's injecting some nefarious commands that, again, you didn't ask to take place, but once it happens, who owns the responsibility and the burden? These are the kinds of very high-level issues that companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and these multi-billion-dollar companies, they understand these are important issues, and they're trying to solve them. And because of just the amazingness of AI, as we've talked about tonight, they have a capacity to solve many of those problems much more quickly than they would have historically been addressed with other kinds of technology cycles. But nonetheless, these are things that we need to think about and so forth. Can I just add on one point on the prior entrepreneurial conversation? You know, as someone who's built a number of businesses, but also I'm an investor now, you know, there's a couple of truisms that we use a lot in my world. One of them is, from a technology standpoint, just because you can doesn't mean you should. There's a lot of conversation now about what we call AI slop, of people just creating artificially generated stuff, but it doesn't really have any meaning or value. The other thing we talk about a lot is we see companies that we would essentially call a technology looking for a problem. So from a business standpoint, the truism remains the same while the technology changes. You have to find a problem that's important and then figure out how technologies help solve it. And don't just get enamored with AI because it's AI, but make sure that's really the right tool for the problem. I even think, as it relates to government and Minister Van Triple's comments earlier about, I'm sure there are many efficiencies that are obvious from inside the ministry. But I think also from a business standpoint, you can flip that around and look at the opportunity from an outside-in perspective and say, what is, if we asked Anguillians, what are the biggest pain points with a given ministry or agency or that they interact with from a digital services perspective? I'm sure they will tell you what the greatest pain points are. And starting the perspective from that side is also an entrepreneurial way to think about the use of AI.
100%.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We do have time for one or two more questions from the audience. Do we have any? Oh, I can't see.
Good evening. I'm Zamar David. I came here with the Anguilla Robotics Association. Our question was supposed to ask, what software would you recommend for like us, because we're studying mostly robotics engineering and whatnot, to help us with our initiative here in Anguilla?
So what software would you recommend
Yes, like
for
an AI.
robotics engineer persons?
Yes, like an AI software tool.
Okay.
So, just for a bit more context, because as Mr. Han would have mentioned earlier, a lot of the AI tools nowadays are actually quite generalized in terms of their ability to carry out functions. So my question to you, just for a bit more clarification, is have you tried any of these AI tools and found that there have been shortcomings with what you're trying to achieve? And is that the reason why you're asking this question? If so, what are the shortcomings?
Indeed, most of it is telling me mostly websites on where to purchase said things or where to get said syllabus, instead of actually helping me develop my skills from where I am right now.
So I'm no expert in robotics engineering tools, but I would tell you in my life in business and from a personal standpoint, this is almost a perfect example of the kind of thing that I would ask ChatGPT and do a deep research request to say, here's the kinds of tools I'm looking for more information about. Here's how I want to use it, which is to say I need something that is simpler or more advanced. These are the kinds of things I'm trying to accomplish, and I would allow that to start the discovery process for me, and then perhaps that might direct me to some sites that would give me further information where I might be able to learn from others in the community that are already doing robotics engineering, and I can learn from them as well. So I'd encourage you to explore that way as well.
Yeah.
There's a few.
Good evening. I'm a student in Form 4 at the Albiona Lake College Comprehensive School. And my question is there a regional plan between Anguilla and other Caribbean countries to share AI resources for education?
So at this point, the short answer is no. To share AI resources, the short answer of that is no. The scope is there and the discussions have been started. But what we first have to look at is bringing to the table all of the varying conversations of resources. So Mr. Han spoke about the phenomenal resources that Anguilla has, and one of the key resources Anguilla has is the .ai country level top domain. So that is a leverage point for a country like Anguilla. In terms of the other islands, and when I say the other islands, we're talking about the smaller islands within the OECS. Our resources are very human-oriented. So what that means is we have a lot of human capability. We have students who are looking to learn. We have persons looking to start businesses, etc. We have a financial sector that many times is more oriented not towards start. I hope that wasn't me and what I was saying. Not oriented towards startups, individual small businesses and so on, but more oriented towards already established larger businesses in some respects. So I think the conversation is there to be had. The countries need to come to the table and discuss what resources are available from each of them and how they're willing to pool those resources and what sort of what sort of procedural and policy changes that they're willing to take to actually make that happen. But as of now, actual decisions, there are none at this point.
Would just add, though, that as my colleague would have shared, the conversation is at least starting. So I do know that there are regional bodies such as the Caribbean Telecoms Union, for example, who they would have recently sent around a draft for a regional digital transformation plan. The reference to Anguilla and its AI top-level domain, for example, that's something that's unique and a competitive advantage to Anguilla that may not be able to be exploited or leveraged by other countries within the region in the same sense. However, it is important that we do have a lot of common problems between the different regional countries, even though we're all different. So it's about coming together, having those conversations, sharing knowledge so that everyone isn't trying to reinvent the wheel. There's something that's called the digital divide, for example, and it applies on many different levels. If we try to compare the United States, as Gina would have mentioned, with all of the digital solutions to the region, where we may be lacking a lot of those, but we have the opportunity. If we compare ourselves to other islands within the region, we'll see that we are more on a similar level playing field to them. So it's like if we find a solution to a problem, whether it's in education, whether it's in legal framework, or we put policies in place and we realize it's working, then it's about facilitating those conversations amongst the region. And I think one of the challenges that we have, or one thing that we need to work on a bit more, is this room is filled with persons on the younger end of the spectrum, which is a good thing. You're going to be the persons who get to leverage AI the most and get to have the benefits. But oftentimes it's also important to get the leaders and the policymakers in the rooms, because they are the ones who set the resources spending, who set the direction, and we need to make sure that there's not a disconnect between those who will be able to leverage AI the most and those who actually set the direction for what the priority is going to be.
So we have time for just one more question.
Good night, everybody. My name is Will. I'm the owner of Fresh Again Self-Custodians, a barbershop in Anguilla. And I have a question for Hun. We tend to speak a lot about our success stories and about AI and all that stuff, but what was your biggest failure or turning point during a major technological shift, and how did it shape your perspective on innovation?
Biggest failure, technology shift.
Yeah, for Hun.
What was your biggest failure?
What was your biggest failure or turning point during a major technological shift, and how did it shape your perspective on innovation?
That's a fantastic question. So I will give you an example from earlier in my career. So when I flashed all the logos earlier, I was during the Internet Web 1.0 days, I was at a company called Digex, which was one of the pioneers of building internet infrastructure to help big organizations build their first websites and their first e-commerce infrastructures and so on. And we built a huge company. We sold that company, and I left and I went to a tiny little startup. And this startup was a Finnish company from Helsinki, Finland. And they had developed an incredibly advanced video compression technology, which allowed you, in the days before you were likely born, on 3G telephone technology, you could watch videos on your phone, which was a mind-blowing idea in those days. And the company was former Nokia people from the phone company Nokia. They were incredibly smart guys. But what we learned in that particular instance was, while the technology was great, the market wasn't necessarily ready for that technology. And we also learned a truism that I've used many times in my life now, which is you don't want to be competing with Microsoft. And Microsoft was developing a standard that we now call MPEG-4 that was directly competitive with the thing that this company was creating. And as a result, after 6 or 8 months, we essentially had to shut the company down because we were too early and there was a dominant player that we could not get around. So timing is an important thing in business as well. I talked about sort of technology looking for a problem. We were a little bit of a technology looking for a problem in a way. The market wasn't demanding this from us, and we were just too early. So those are things to learn from.
Thank you guys so much. So this concludes our evening. We want to thank our panelists for all of the insightful information shared this evening, as well as the audience for your questions. We want to give a huge thanks to the Angular Youth Business Foundation for putting on this event, as well as all of the sponsors and organizers who aided. Have yourselves a great evening, and we'll be joining you for our cocktail reception. Thank you guys so much.